But what do you think this might mean for prices in the mid to long term?
Well, I don't think in the mid or in the immediate aftermath of the release, it's going to have an enormous downswing on prices. I think markets are still going to be very much squarely focused on supply going forward and the lack of it that we're going to be seeing from Russia, the incremental additions we're seeing from OPEC Plus, and so far the real lack of price response from U.S. producers to high prices. For the longer term, though, I do think this is a bit of a risky strategy for the U.S. to draw down on its SPR so heavily. If you think that we're going to be going into the more heavy use summer months in the United States, you're going to be drawing down your inventories just as you're going to be needing them in a time of uncertain supply conditions. And then going forward, if we do face a oil market that is more or less structurally in a deficit for a prolonged period, drawing down on those reserves as well could help to underpin a bullish case for oil prices over, say, a 12 to 24-month period.
Okay, interesting to watch. Ed, also wanted to get your take on how this could potentially be structured. Do you expect this to be an exchange or outright sales? And then secondly, do you think that the United States is just going to act unilaterally here, or are we going to see a wider coordinated release between America and its allies?
Yeah, they could do it in a number of ways. One is essentially a swap. So you release the oil now in exchange for getting some delivery later on down the line. But that would be really counting on production in the U.S. to increase at a considerable pace to essentially refill the SPR that has been drawn down now. Or it could be an outright sale, which would probably be more negative for prices if we did indeed get it. In terms of coordination, we did see some previous coordination with other members of the OECD and a few other big importing nations in Asia last year when there was an SPR release. We had, the UK, Japan, South Korea all cooperating. So I would expect to see that there might be some push from the US to try and coordinate an even bigger release. We've seen messaging from the IEA essentially calling this an energy shock, an energy supply crisis. So there might be some coordination there in terms of trying to release strategic reserves from more consumers.
I also wanted to get your take on the timing of all of this, because this threat to release more barrels from the SPR comes on the same day that OPEC producers are preparing to meet. Do we see this as a snub to OPEC? And is this going to change the calculus for those producers who have been, let's say, a little hesitant to help out the United States here when it comes to ramping up oil supply?
No, I don't think it's a snub towards the OPEC countries, but I think what it does reflect is on the part of the consuming nations, they very much feel that they are in an energy supply crisis. So just not on the basis of a potential SPR release from the United States, but we're also seeing measures to introduce energy rationing across the Eurozone, for instance. So these are measures that are not taken in amply supplied oil market conditions. When you look at the structure of forward curves, they're very much telling you that this is not a market that is well supplied, that there is some considerable supply shock going forward over the rest of 2022. I don't think, though, that this is really going to push OPEC Plus to try and increase the scale of their production increases at a faster pace, that they're still going to roll over with the slightly more than 400,000 barrels a day per month for the May levels going forward. And I think what this may do is just be the ammunition OPEC Plus needs to say, well, look, there is oil available out there. You can draw down on the reserves. We've seen similar messaging from OPEC countries in the past when there has been a request for faster production increases to say, well, you built up reserves when oil prices were considerably lower in 2020, so why not draw down on them? The conditions now, though, are very different. We are in essentially an energy supply crisis or energy supply shock. So whether or not OPEC will respond to that, I don't think so at this moment.